Welcome to the Dance Reel podcast. I'm Kate Histon. To be part of our community, subscribe or follow this channel. This episode was sponsored by Master Dancer Mindset. Know yourself, be yourself, and express yourself on and off the stage. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Chasta Hamilton. Chasta is an internationally recognised dance educator, author and speaker, leading a movement for purpose-driven dance education. She is the founder of Stage Door Productions and was the creator of The Dance Exec, an influential resource that supports dance studio owners and educators with leadership and business tools. Her book, Trash the Trophies, critiques toxic competition culture, and her non-for-profit Girls Geared for Greatness empowers young girls through mentorship and leadership development. Chasta's work has earned her national acclaim for transforming dance with integrity and heart. Chasta, welcome to my podcast, and thank you so much for taking me up on the offer for being able to pick your genius brain today.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so excited to be here and can't wait to chat and sharing some great conversation about something we all love, which is dance.
Absolutely. And before we start getting into the depth of our conversations, I really want to know about your background in dance. How did you start and what did the dance scene look like when you were little?
So dance for me is maybe like one of the most consistent things that I've had in my life. I started dancing when I was 2 years old and I grew up in East Tennessee. So it was a small town and I loved dance so much. And I had some childhood trauma. Both of my parents passed away in my childhood, and dance was this outlet for me that was just so healthy, so expressive, so creative. I really found it stabilizing and grounding, and I loved what it poured into me creatively. And as I started reaching high school age, I started choreographing, like in my bedroom and coming up with these concepts and shows and imaginary dance schools. And interestingly enough, I got a full academic scholarship to college in Raleigh, where I live now, to a school that's known for its engineering program. And the arts are kind of, not at the forefront of that university, but it was an incredible opportunity. So I came to college thinking that I was going to be an attorney and still was teaching and choreographing on the side, once I got to university. And then as a graduation was upon us, and I said, no, I don't think that the legal path is going to be what I take. I'm going to stick with what I love and my passion, and I want to do it good. And I just want to make sure that children are changed for the better through this art in the same way that all of my teachers and studios along the way, poured into me in a really healthy and positive way.
Oh, beautiful. And when you were training, did you enter competitions? What was that like for you?
We did. So around middle school, we started loosely doing competitions. And the competitive dance world, this was in the 90s and early 2000s. It looked very different than it does today. There were a lot less awards, and it was more about the camaraderie, the experience. We did a lot of convention and competition experiences and a few competition only. But because of the area where we lived, we would have to travel. So we were always, driving or, to get to a different city or town. And the most meaningful part of that was these enriching experiences where we shared in community and bonding. We got to new places, and we got to do what we love, which is perform. When I think back to those memories, there's nothing about an adjudication that is what I remember.
And I could say the same growing up. And as part of why I wanted to reach out to you is you've written this game changer book, Trash the Trophies, which really questions the competition scene, why we're doing it, and if we choose to do it, how we can do it better. How can it be healthy? And at what turning point did you make the decision to remove competitions from your dance studio?
Sure, that's a great question. And I always like to say that I'm not anti-competition. I believe in healthy competition, but when the dance studios that I own, Stage Door Dance Productions, opened in 2009, we started participating in competitions because that was one of the expectations of what a good dance studio does, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
did it and we were successful. A lot of people like to say, well, she was just a sore loser, so that's why she stopped doing dance competitions, but we weren't. We had national titles.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we lost, whatever winning and losing means in a subjective art, but sure, we had wins and we had losses. But what I was noticing is a shift in the culture and the environment of the studio. And it was
Mm.
becoming opposite of that healthy, holistic place that I received when I was a child. I was seeing it cause friction amongst our staff, right? Because
Mm.
when you have staff choreographing and you're asking them to go up against each other and somebody's going to determine that one person is quote unquote better at choreographing than another, of course, that's going to create issues in the ecosystem. I was seeing
Yeah.
it amongst peers. I was seeing it amongst our families, right? Like it felt very anti the true opportunity of the power of art when it's leveraged in the right way. Because we
Mm.
want catharsis and connection, we want community. And what we were experiencing was extreme division.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to watch this. I told my staff that I wanted to monitor it for 2 years and track everything good, bad, great, ugly, everything, every complaint from a parent, every observation from an event, my feelings. And so for 2 years, between 2013 and 2015, I was tracking every event we went to and really with a surgical eye assessing, is this conducive to the vision and environment I'm aiming to create, or is it counterintuitive? And ultimately, at the end of that period, it was counterintuitive. And we
Mm.
knew that, not only deciding not to do competition, but extracting the studios from competition, like looking at people and saying, hey, we're not doing this anymore, was going to be an uphill, we were swimming upstream. Um, but we did it. And I'm so proud that we did.
And what was that process like? Did people leave? Tell
They
us
left.
all of
They
it.
did. They left. They left. And that's,
Hi.
and the thing is, I feel like so often in life, that step that we really need to be taking that's true to our inner voice may be counterintuitive to someone else's voice. So we don't
Mm.
always take it. And because of that fear, I fear that so many of us never reach our fullest potential. Because even as scary and bold as this was, if I hadn't have done it, I would be living a lie 10 years
Yeah.
later. So this was a decade ago. And so when we made that shift, we took what felt very scary at the time. We sat down with every family that participated in the competitive arm of the program one by one and said that we would be shifting directions and
Yeah.
that we understood if that didn't work for them, we wanted to continue to support them and so on. So we had those conversations. Students left, staff left, and it was very quiet. And we
Yeah.
had to rebuild this heightened training experience, which, I mean, it nosedived and it was much smaller the season after that. But this is the optimism. Our general enrollment the following year increased 25%. And that's pretty significant
Yeah.
because this shift speaks to the average person,
Yeah.
right? The average person is a little deterred by what they see from the outside of the competitive dance space. There's a lot of uncertainty is this what I want for my child?
Mm.
So by learning how to message, tell our story, and differentiate, we actually came out stronger, even though there was that little bit
Yeah.
of uncertainty in the in between.
Did you, as the leader, at one point when they left, did you ever have a moment of going, what have I done? Was this the right thing? Or did you stay true and strong, holding that space for yourself? What was that like?
The only thing that I thought is, why didn't I do this sooner?
Wow.
Why did I let myself feel so bad for so long? I would wake up
Mm.
in the mornings and cry in the shower. I was breaking out in hives. I would have so much anxiety opening my inbox, because what was frustrating people was so far beyond anything I had control over. and it was making
Yeah,
them place value on our teaching and our training. And I didn't like that
mm,
because I knew we had great teaching and training, but they were
yeah.
starting to question that based
W-
on these
Based on what other schools are doing?
environments
Okay.
or what these judges would say, right? Like if
Yeah,
we were
right.
winning,
Yeah.
their child was too good for the program. Or if we were losing, we weren't training them to be good enough. So it's like, how do you, where do you go? What's,
Yeah. I must admit, when I had my school, I remember I was in a new relationship. I'm married to him now. And he came and was supporting me at a competition. And one of our routines got first. And he said, "Wow, that's really great." And I said, "Yeah, it is. But no, it's not. Because now there's pressure that I felt to outdo myself the following year and it doesn't end." That's actually how I felt. So I had really placed, as a school owner and as a teacher, I'd choreographed that certain routine. So I felt also that emotional responsibility for it, that sense of how can I outdo myself? And, how can I, what am I going to do next year? And I'd gotten caught up in that competitive treadmill, and I just had to emotionally go, it's fine, it's okay. And the way I feel like I got through was just seeing the wave, like a surfer will paddle out, go on the wave. You'll have your good years where, oh, a choreographer might be great, you might be on top, and someone else's turn. But I wasn't curious enough or probably brave enough to question, do we as a school want to be doing this? But I know for me as the owner, yeah, I would feel the anxiety and the pressure. And then the pressure from the parents, especially, they would see maybe other students, especially in solos, do an aerial. They're doing an aerial now. So they'd come back and, so they're doing an aerial. Can my daughter do an aerial? Like, she's not ready yet. That would be unsafe dance practice. But so I felt that pressure as well. And I'm sure many teachers do feel that pressure. Was that something that happened in your school that might have been also a deciding factor?
absolutely. The comparison trap is it's so dangerous, right? I believe dance is so individualized. It's a performing art. So
Yeah.
every student is going to move through that journey differently. And just because so and so is doing this at this age doesn't mean that so and so is also going to be doing this. And I do believe that competition inherently lends itself to this idea of conformity, right?
Yeah.
This song is winning, this style is winning, this move is winning. And then we start seeing that over and over and over because people are chasing the win versus
Yeah.
chasing the process of the art. And so then I
Yes.
also look back and I'm like, how much creativity have we lost, especially in the last 20 years, because we're so focused on this mechanical repetition of what is quote unquote winning on a competition stage.
Yeah. As a judge, one of the things I suppose I find frustrating is seeing the art lost, the art and the impulsive and the spontaneity and that true sense of actually seeing the soul come through in the performance. And it's like we're aiming for perfection and these tricks over the creativity of, can we just dance? So that's something that I suppose I'm seeing from this angle at the moment.
And then there's the cost, right? This was another huge factor
Yeah.
for me is I was seeing the invoices come across my desk that would then go to the client. And I think there is this disconnect of clients thinking that so much of that money stays in the actual studio business instead of being pushed out to these
Yeah.
competitions and events. And it was getting to a point where I was like, I no longer felt like I was being my client's best advocate by saying,
Yeah.
this
Okay.
is how I think you can have a strong return on investment in your training.
Yeah. What are the costs over in your area to enter a student, say for a group and then a solo? Thereabouts.
So, yeah, in the range, and obviously this has shifted since the book
Yeah.
was written, but from what I've heard from the market, just general conversation, is a solo could cost anywhere from 180 to $300 for 2 to 3 minutes on stage. And your groups are probably more in the like 50 to 90 range per person per dance, depending on the event.
In Australia, we have more Stedfords. That's more like a UK kind of English influence. So they there are a few competitions, and the competitions are owned by businesses, whereas the Eisteddfods are non-for-profits. And the Eisteddfods cost for a solo, I haven't had my school for a few years, but you could get them as cheap as $10 to enter. But I did once, back in 2003, enter a competition, and I stopped doing it because the entry fee was $70 for a group, and that was back in 2003.
Exactly. Like that's not, and from the studio owners and the business owner perspective, that's not revenue that's staying in house. Like you're basically just funneling it through. And
Yeah.
so when you're looking at your business health, like that's not really real revenue. Which I always encourage people to consider. We did a white papers report on this 2 years ago, 2023. And one of the questions was, what's the average amount spent per family on just like competition and competition adjacent things? So not training, but costumes, entry fees, travels, etc. And our sweet spot number, I think the median was around 10 to 12,000 a year. We had outlying numbers up to 125,000. And then
Wow.
I got a direct message a few months ago from a mom who was just, feeling so suffocated by competitive dance because she had already spent like $50,000
Yeah.
by December.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Those are extreme numbers.
Yeah. When I had my school, we'd only do 3 a year, and that was all I wanted to do. But I felt pressure from some parents to want to go that way. And what do you believe are the biggest problematic messages that young people are receiving when they enter the competition space?
I think it's that you have to pay to play to receive self-valuation. And I think it loses focus on the reality that the power of performance is in the process, not necessarily the product. Because when you're focusing on the process, you get the product. But if you're focusing on the product, you lose the process.
Wow. You're a thought leader. Can you say that again?
That sounds so fancy, but
No.
I feel like, right, I'm a big believer, and you and I have had a little bit of a conversation about this power of intrinsic motivation over extrinsic, which that's what helps you live life in a competitive way. And when you're focusing on the product, which the competition really does, because you can't ask children to make this, and parents to make a financial commitment and not expect the outcome. So that's a very product-driven goal. But the power of art lies in the process. And if you're focused on the product, you're losing that huge power of the process, which is where I believe lives can really be changed. And what do the children love? They just want to perform. They love performing.
Do you think it's possible that people, students, families, because I'm going to say families because it is a family commitment, enters the dance competition space and studios in a way that is healthy? And if so, what would that look like?
So I do. I think there is opportunity, but I think it would require a huge overhaul of the way we've been thinking about things, the way we've been doing things, and education. I have this really interesting idea because I love this educational layer of how can we teach through performance as well. So if this were to work in a really meaningful way, like this could be an example where maybe, you have 10 schools coming to this event and each are going to receive a theme, right? Like they're going to get, maybe it's like big tech, or we did a piece recently about women leaders in ancient Rome, like something where they can really deep dive and learn. And each team would get this theme and they would say, okay, you have to put together a 10-minute piece. And so the task and the challenge then would be, how do we create that piece and focus on the process in studio? And then conceptually we bring it and share it in this like festival style environment, receive adjudication. And then I think it becomes so more multifaceted than let's do a 2-minute dance that maybe doesn't even have meaning, that maybe we're just doing to reach a product. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just big on thought and intent, and I think that the way the environment currently is set, we've lost that power of what is the intentionality? What is the point of doing 12 routines?
And for what is with your leg in second when you're not strong enough, pull up and
Yes.
it's unsafe
Yes.
just because you're trying to do this trick.
Like,
Oh,
why not
yeah.
invest in the training? Like,
Yeah.
become more well-rounded, take a new style, do voice lessons, experience performance, right? Go see
Yeah.
shows, support the arts. There's so many ways to enrich a dance journey. And I think when we're thinking about like, what does competition look like? We have to say, how is this changing the person in a way that's beyond just what could be written on a resume, right?
Yeah.
Because contemporary dance, titanium 20 times on a resume, did that change the child or were we just asking them to perform?
Yeah. Hmm. And do you think that one can enter the competition space without comparison? Do you think that's possible?
I think that's kind of untrue to the thought of competition, right? Because there is this idea of competition being against oneself. And yet,
Mm.
and I do believe, especially if you're looking at like the scope of life and how we have to practice resilience and
Yeah.
perseverance, and that is true. But I did not see that possible when we were competing.
Yeah. I think I hold out hope that it's possible. I know for me as a dancer, being really honest, it wasn't possible. I didn't have, and you need to have that ethical, heart centered teacher. And then on the other side of it, having parents that also have their own lives and are modeling that to their children. So they're not projecting onto their kids, I need you to be something because I wasn't that or I don't feel that. I mean, for me, I suppose I hold space, and I think the framework of the child entering competition space has to be set correctly and with integrity. But even that, I'm thinking if that was in place, could it work? And so for me, I hold out hope going, can it can. But I don't know. I don't actually have the answer. I don't know. So,
And I
yeah.
do think, just from what I've observed in a lot of the conversations I've had since Trash the Trophies came out in 2020, is change is going to have to happen from like the outside in. I think
Mm.
there's a lot of fear. Like the studios, a lot of the educators, especially those that are leading with heart and that are thinking, bigger and broader, are ready for a change, but they
Mm.
fear their client base leaving. But what I'm
Yeah.
also seeing, the clients are also incredibly frustrated. Like a lot of them want a healthier, happier, greater return on investment environment for their dancer, but they don't want to say that to their studio owner because they think their studio owner will be disappointed. And so there's a lot of conversation not happening, but everyone is kind of saying the same thing. And I think if we, as dancers, as parents, as instructors and educators, choreographers are intentional about saying like, hey, this is what we believe is the direction this needs to go for the sake of the children, change will happen. And there's no better way to ignite change than how you spend your dollar.
As a judge, I've seen both empowering and damaging aspects of the competition culture. How do you think we can navigate the line between healthy competition and harmful pressure?
That's a great question. I also adjudicated for several years. And so I feel like the perspectives I came, into this decision with were a variety, from competing myself to being a judge to being a studio owner to being a teacher that choreographs. And I think when we're thinking about healthy competition, there has to be so much training surrounding it. And you've already touched on this briefly, but how are we having the conversations to educate, to set that framework, to set up a debrief, to really create a full circle learning experience? And I believe we should do this in whatever activation we have, whether it's a competition, a travel experience, a performance that's more concert style, like whatever we're doing with our dancers. I think there's been just historically and systemically a lot of expectation, like do this because it's always been done, or do this because I say so. versus, well, let me like actually look at the person and what they're experiencing and this activation that we've been given and having a full circle conversation, setting them up for success, talking them and explaining them through the process, and then also being there with support at the end of the process. And I think just systemically, there's so much expectation in dance. Like, even though I feel like I had the best teachers, they would always, I just think about like when they would say, like, hold your core. Well, no one said, like, this is what your core is. And as a 10-year-old, do you know? And you don't. So, how can we open those lines of communication to not be, I have this expectation of, or I'm talking at, but how can we go on this journey together to make it really rewarding and powerful?
And with that, when you took away the competitions, did you have more performances during the year? What did that look like, your
Absolutely.
calendar?
So that program has continued to evolve as well. So we knew we had to have something to replace competition. Like we weren't
Yeah.
just going to say, like, if you want to dance and dance at a higher, more intense level, we're not here for you. We still wanted to fill that market in a really different and unique way. So we started with an intensive training program, and over the years, that's evolved into our Elevated Pathways program. And so our students have community performances. They typically range 2 to 4 per semester, low to no cost. We do a benefit show every year where we raise funds throughout the year through a variety of activations for a designated cause or nonprofit. Like this year, we're doing for hurricane relief. And
Oh,
yeah, so since 2017, the students have raised over $225,000 for varying initiatives, which is incredible. And they're able to like flex that competitive spirit and that competitive muscle in that
wow.
those challenges and tasks. And then we also have travel experiences, which, were unusual during the pandemic, but have really been coming back in a more robust way. So this past summer, we performed in Rome, Italy. In January, we performed at Carnegie Hall in New York City. And then this summer, we'll perform at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. So, as leaders, like, sure, it's easy to just sign up and pay for a competition. But I think when
Yep.
you're looking at your children and saying, how can I provide like a really incredible, enriching, and engaging experience in our offerings, I think there's creativity and leadership in thinking
Mm.
about like, well, how do we make those? And I'm really grateful we have such a creative and all-in team at Stage Door Dance that helps do that every day.
And have you noticed, how do your students feel? What's the culture like in your school now? So after they've done that community performance, compared to what it was during the competition, what's the difference?
Night and day. The studio is like my favorite place. It's my entire family's favorite place to be. We love the people of this community, everyone here. And it's not to say we don't have challenges because we certainly do, because that's
Yeah.
life, but it's a place that really is a breath of fresh air where it's okay, we're all coming together to create a better world. And our tagline is
Mm.
be more at Stage Door. And we always say that more is a call to personal and professional elevation, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So are we bringing our best selves to our training, to our performance, to how we approach moving the needle? And these
Yeah.
are all very thoughtful conversations we have with our students as well. We educate on why we don't do dance competitions and,
Yeah.
why we've chosen other paths and directions. And ultimately, we just say, like, our goal here is for you to not just be competitive in dance or anything
Yeah.
singular, but to help you broadly think about being competitive in life.
I love it. And two questions with that. Have you seen the standard of your studio slip?
It's actually, I would say quite the opposite.
Cool.
I would say during COVID, the pandemic, there were challenges because we were virtual, we were closed down for very long, and there was a rebuild period. And I will say, since things have stabilized more with like
Mm.
schools and some of the surrounding things that also create impact, I look around and I'm like, wow, this training looks so good and so strong. And what I love about it more than anything is that it's rooted in a foundation, right? It's
Yeah.
not a snapshot or a flash or being done for that product. It's a
Mm.
deep understanding of the process, which also enables us to see much fewer injuries, right?
Yeah.
Because the strength and stability is there. One challenge that we have faced is helping people understand that slow growth is okay and often leads to like a more sustainable career. That dance and the performing arts, this is not a fast food situation like the aerials I think you mentioned earlier. Like
Yeah.
it may not happen overnight, and if it is going to happen, it's going to happen in a progressive and safe way. And even in our point
Yeah.
training, the same thing. A child has to be intrinsically motivated to do the work to achieve what they want to get on the other side. And of course, there are institutions that will, you know, encourage faster learning, but we're always going to be rooted in safe, progressive learning.
In my experience in doing this podcast, the people that I've interviewed, like yourself, that are I call them the game changers, the ones that are out there thought leading and trying to really bring some heart-centered education, they've said the same thing. And the kids are all peaking too early, getting burnout, feeling like they've had a career by the age of 16, mental health issues, injuries. So it's swinging back with people like yourself to even those that are listening and still want to do competitions. This in itself is still worthy of a conversation of, can we put training over competition performance, like proper safe dance training? Because that is definitely something that I feel, and speaking from a judge's perspective, having a look, there's lots of training that shouldn't be happening that way on the stage, because it's all about the flashy movements, the flashy, flash, flash. And it's like, no.
And just even some of what we're seeing in the hyper flexibility, right? Like just really deeply concerning. Like, of course, there's a safe way to develop flexibility, but every body is not going to be able to achieve the same range of flexibility. And I think if
No.
we're trying to force flexibility or turnout, we're again thinking more about conformity versus creativity and how each individual body can safely move and learn.
Yeah. And the other question I wanted to ask, now that you're not doing competitions, is have you noticed within your students, are they still showing resilience and showmanship, competitive spirit?
Yes, I even see more. It's like they can breathe through it. Like it's
Yeah.
not layered with what's happening on the other side. But it's
Yeah.
like, let me go out on this stage and let me leave my heart on the stage because I love to perform. And one thing that I'm really passionate about are arms. I think arms can make or break a number. This is something, especially from my adjudication days, that really sat with me.
Yeah.
And coming out of the pandemic, arms were one of the things we really had to say, like, okay, we're back to strong arms, we're back to details. Like, is it a fist? Is it like finger? Like what are the details and how do we make those exact? So you can still carry that precision into everyday performance. And I think that's when it becomes more powerful too.
Yeah.
We're taking that level of care even with our recital dances. Like we don't say we have a recreational and a competitive program. Instead, we have a really strong dance program, and then we have an elevated pathways program for people that want to take it even up a notch beyond a traditional class.
And so, what would you say to dance educators or studio owners who feel trapped in competition but want to reframe it somehow? What would you say to them?
I would start with education. Call it out, right? Like when we see things, there's studio owners are in this strange position where there's so much fear, and I don't think they should have that fear. Like call it out and say, I'm noticing some concerning things happening in the competitive space, and this is what they are. And as the advocate for your child, this is making me feel uncomfortable, and I'm going to be activating some alternatives so that I can make sure that I am investing your dollars in the best way possible for your child's training. And
Yeah.
I think as long as we're all working together, there's also this strange breakdown between studio owners and parents, right? Like I believe in looking at them as allies instead of adversaries.
Mm.
Keep them a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Let them play for your team and let that ecosystem decide your studio, your families, what's going to be in the best interest of those people, because that's who you lead. And
Yeah.
then if you find brands that you're aligned with that you want to participate in, that's an option, but it's certainly not a requirement.
And on having conversations, I like what you said about keeping them as allies, not adversaries. Have you ever come up against maybe a difficult dance parent, and how have you managed that? I don't know if you can give an example.
Sure. I I always say, listen first.
Yeah.
And in my younger days, I wasn't as good at that. I would always feel so defensive because I
Yeah.
felt like I was really trying and giving my best.
Mm.
But a lot of times when a concern is brought, it's coming from their experience and their place.
Mm.
And sometimes just hearing it and saying, like, well, where is that perception or that perspective coming from? And where I really became better at this was during those 2 years when I was tracking every concern.
Yeah.
And like, I'm thinking of one example, a mom was really upset because we had traveled and the venue wasn't allowing any kind of outside food, and there was a medical need for food, and a security guard had been very abrasive, and it just became like a situation it didn't need to be.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, from that family's perspective, they took their entire weekend, they invested a significant amount of money, and they were made to feel less than, like they didn't
Yeah.
belong. And it
Hmm.
all happened because I suggested that we attend this event. So when you see it as like a series of micro pieces that come together, you can usually find what the real problem is. Like a lot of times conflicts are symptoms of something that's underlying. And so
Mm.
I think when we take away the symptoms or identify what's that root source of the problem that's causing them, we open ourselves to greater communication. And I think
Yeah.
when people trust you and feel like they can communicate with you, you generate client loyalty that's going to last for a really long time.
And have you got a studio manager or administration? Are you the person that your parents will contact if they do have an issue, or is there someone else as well?
So we have a team of 20, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And I certainly couldn't do, and some are full time, some are part time. I couldn't do this without any of them because they're all so critical to our ecosystem.
Yeah.
And there is a funneled pathway, but I'm still very much in communication.
And obviously, I'm assuming you've trained your management team to reflect how you would like them to respond and your leadership qualities.
Absolutely. And I always say there's so much power in just taking a pause. I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes, especially in conflict, we just want to have like a resolution. But
Yeah.
sometimes just, taking a breath, or I always like to say, like, where was my blind spot? Like, what did I miss that maybe could have helped solve the situation faster? Or how do we get to a place of resolve? Our whole team likes to say that let's be problem solvers, not problem creators.
Yes.
So, how on the front end can we try to avoid any problems that may emerge or arise? And then when those problems do emerge or arise, did we miss something that could have prevented them along the way?
So, having your team has been something that you've built from the ground floor up, and that you can see the influence that the culture of your dance school has in the community through performances. How long has that taken, and how do you feel about it now?
So, this is our 16th year. And I would say every day since the day I was born has
Yeah.
has played like a factor, right? Because it's never this like arrival point.
Yeah.
But it's all of those moments that build up. I will say when you're feeling that resistance and that chaos, and I see a lot of this on like the chat boards, the dance
Yeah.
related, where there's so much frustration and energy. And what I recognized when my energy was going more towards feeling bad versus like moving forward, that was when
Mhm.
the tension reached a point that there had to be a change. And
Yeah.
then every day thereafter, our current culture has formed, and it's
Okay.
not been rainbows and butterflies every day. There have been some really, really hard days, some major
Yeah.
life changes in that process. But there's this saying that's like change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and beautiful on the other side. The other thing that I always tell my staff is that we are never done changing. So we started using this phrase that we are change persistent instead of change resistant. And we're constantly thinking about how can we change faster to stay with the times versus being stuck in the times or behind the times.
Yeah, wow. I bet they love having you as their leader.
I like to think they do. So many of them, I actually taught so many of them before the studio
Oh,
opened. So a lot of them, we've been together for decades at this point.
that's beautiful. Oh, and with that, you've written about the rise of private equity in the dance studio industry. How do you think this trend is changing the landscape of dance education, particularly for smaller independent studios?
That's a great question. And it is the private equity conversation is something that I've been watching. And similar to what I just said about staying, ahead of the times, it's really important to have your pulse on what's happening around you, not just in dance, but in the youth activity space, education space, anything that impacts a child and their development. So this actually came to the forefront probably about almost 2 years ago when I was looking into childcare facilities. We had one close in our market, and I had been asked if I wanted to consider going into that. So for a very, very short period, like a day, I looked
Yeah.
into it and I became attuned to this reality of private equity backed childcare centers and how that has really created a less than ideal experience for the child in
Yeah.
America. And then I was at another conference a few months later where it was about child activities, and private equity was in conversation and how it was influencing gymnastics, soccer, swim, and was making its way to dance. And,
Wow.
my thought was, why? Like, why? Like, we've seen what it does to elder care, child care, um, any type of person driven service or care. So why would this be the path we would want to go? And I don't really buy into this idea of like it was coming anyway, so someone needed to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge opportunity for schools that are independently owned. Like obviously the private equity piece, they're really only looking at top 40 markets in the US. So
Okay.
that's major metro areas, which I live in one. So that's another reason that I was also very curious about the conversation. There's a huge opportunity for schools that are independent to differentiate and say, we are locally owned and operated. We are here for the child. This is our culture. This is what we do. And I think that's really exciting. And it's not a time of fear. It's just a time of shift. And how do we want to stand strong in that shift? And if you are looking at selling, I think it's really important that studios make sure they go through a proper evaluation process, that they explore all of the options. And
Yeah.
Kate, you can probably talk about that more as someone that has exited. It's just knowledge. It's all about knowledge and education.
In your opinion, what do you foresee the biggest risks when private equity firms prioritize profit over community driven educational aspects of dance?
Well, I just think it's a strange concept to me to commodify childhood. So we're basically shifting childhood from an individual child to become a number on a form. And I was just having this conversation with a parent in our studio yesterday, and she's an incredible recruiter for a lot of corporations. And she said, the fastest way for people to not want to work somewhere is for private equity to take over. So when you have this, how do you sustain staffing? How do you sustain the individualized experience? How do you still make sure that this art that saved me as a child is still going to save every single one of these children in your care by not only just giving them dance, because there is the skill. And as you and I know, Kate, when dance is at its best, it gives you so much more than just the skill. And it just doesn't mix for me. When you say, does private equity and a dance studio make sense? For me, the answer is no. Of course, there are many that disagree, and that believe that it does, but it's just, I feel that this is something that I've given a lot of thought to, and I just don't think the outcome is really what we want based on what we've seen and what we know. And I do think history and data are good indicators of where it could go.
Do you think that for studio owners who might be tempted to sell to private equity firms, that maybe what should they consider before making the decision? Are there ways to protect the essence of their studio while still growing?
I think the important thing is that once the sale is done, like having an understanding of what that means. And that there's no control, right? I always believe in this idea of like the sphere of influence and what we can control and what we can't. And I think anytime there is this like huge shift like that, it's really important to understand how that changes, how the sphere shifts. And there are blueprints, right, where you can study like what do earnouts look like with private equity? How would I get like a third party valuation and how can I make sure that I'm being appropriately compensated? Similar to competition, I don't want to say like exiting is bad because I think legacy planning is very important in
Yeah.
creating like a sustainable ecosystem. But I think it's important to be aware. And on the consumer side, it's incredibly important for parents to know where they are letting their children spend time. That's
Mm.
why I feel like having a studio is one of the greatest honors and opportunities because parents are trusting their children to be with you. And that
Yeah.
to me is very sacred. I have a 4-year-old myself and I don't think we can diminish that.
No. And speaking from a position of someone who has sold their school, and it was a very, very quick sale. And I sold to a competitor. Literally, she was 100 meters up the road. A lovely person. And so she owns my old dance school and changed the name. So, but from my experience of having sold, even though I felt after 23 years ready to sell, so I felt ready, there's grief. There's grief afterwards that comes because your dance school is like your baby. And so understanding human behavior and wanting to make sure I was doing the right thing for me and for the next phase of the school, I went and saw a therapist and I said, okay, I'm thinking of doing this. Tell me about the emotional impact that might be a blind spot. And she was great. She said, right, once you sell, it's not yours. You need to actually turn and walk away and let them do it because they're going to change it and they're going to change it. And that's going to hurt if you're sticking around watching this because it won't be the same. And so then there might be just even an internal power struggle. So I did that. I took her advice and I just turned. And so with the new owner, there was a process of having a 2-week handover period. It could have been longer. She was happy with 2 weeks. I was like, okay, I'm happy with 2 weeks. And because she'd already had a dance school, she was implementing mainly her business model. And so I saw her business model and also ethos, just different, but also enough respect for each other. And I think it would have been very hard if I stayed working in the dance school, seeing that transition. I would have liked to have thought I could do it respectfully, but it was, yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to work there anyway, but I had these waves of grief. And so it would all of a sudden hit me. I'd be fine, like, yep, got a new life or doing something new. And then all of a sudden I go, like, and miss my students or feel that sense of, who am I? Also, that identity, which I don't know if studio owners that have had their dance schools for a long time, that shift of identities, that was something I consciously struggled with, but processed quite well. But if you're not aware of it, it would hit you hard. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's perfect and beautiful and so true. Like it's not, if it sounds too good to be true, this is just something for life, then there's probably some deeper things to just dig into and
Yeah.
consider and think about. And that's why I always say, like, ask the hard questions, like, be curious. And transparency is really good and really healthy. And if there's not transparency, like, how can we be our most informed selves?
Yeah. So Chasta, I really love your leadership and the way you think and question things, thinking not just about your own little ecosystem, but the dance world on a national and a global And with part of that, I saw that you have developed a not-for-profit. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Girls Geared for Greatness. Yep. Girls Geared for Greatness. It's a lot of G's.
Girls Geared for Greatness. Can you tell us a bit about Geared for Greatness?
Yeah. So I always say Girls Geared for Greatness is the little engine that could. We started it in 2018. I had a parent in the ecosystem that said, "Hey, I think you could really offer a great leadership program for girls."
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And we're also on a mission to have like a really inclusive dance environment where boys and girls both dance, but there are issues that are pressing to girls and women that are unique. So we said, how can we have these conversations to say, yes, bring your voice to the table. Yes, show up as you are. Yes, you don't need to change. So this started in 2018, just in the studio. It was so successful that people started saying you could get grants. This could be so much bigger. So around 2020, ironically, we started filing with the IRS for our 501c3. That got a little delayed. So really, Girls Geared for Greatness became a full nonprofit around 2021. And at that time, we still couldn't do a lot of things in person. So we did some digital leadership trainings. We started this module program that we wrote in studios and for other studios. And then as we kind of emerged from the pandemic, we said, okay, how can we best serve the market? And right now what we're doing is we're doing like a lot of different activations. So we just had a greatness gallery, which was an art display of art representing the girls' vision of a better world. And they pitched each piece and shared like what that meant. We've had lunch and learns. We're getting ready to do a summer series, which will be virtual. So it'll be global and open to anyone, where we're
Wow.
talking about things like bullying, digital and media consumption, and body image and confidence, just some really good things to kind of marinate on over the summer as we prepare for back to school season. But it's all events, pedagogy designed to say, hey, you as you are great. The world is going to tell you a lot of times that things need to change about you, but who you inherently are and what you inherently want to achieve are possible. And we want to give you the tools to help you get there.
Oh, that's wonderful. So can you give us details and links to these courses? And it's great to know that it's global.
Yes. So the summer series is going to launch soon, and I'll make sure
Great.
that you have the link to
Yeah.
include. We would love to get more voices in the room, and we've designed Girls Geared for Greatness to be very flexible, very low touch, because we understand that bandwidth is limited, and
Yeah.
maybe someone can jump on to this session or participate in this event, but it's not like a meaty commitment or something that requires a lot. It's a come as you are when you can. And it's been very slow and steady to grow. We have no paid staff. It's fully volunteer led and operated. And the voices of our community are really what have made it so amazing. So I'm grateful for what it has been and where it has the opportunity to go.
And do you get much time for your private life? Because you have got
Yeah,
so much going on.
it's a great question. And I feel so blessed. I always say like balance is kind of a facade because balance means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I don't call anything I do work. I love what I do and I feel so grateful to get to do it. It's what I've been doing since I was 2
Yeah.
in different iterations. So, it's just a joy and I try not to overthink it, but I do sleep every night and I love to
Great.
travel and spend time with my family and it's just a really beautiful life.
I'd love to see you come to Australia,
Oh,
run some
well,
courses.
oh, that would be amazing because I have a bucket list item of holding a koala bear. So
Yeah.
it could be a 2 for 1.
I've got a photo of my husband and I. I was too scared to hold the koala bear, but he's holding the koala bear and,
Oh
and
my
I'm
gosh, you
standing
have
next to
to
him.
send that to me.
I'm holding my son and he's holding the koala bear. Yeah,
I
no, it's
love
it's
it.
pretty cute. You'll have to definitely come to Australia. I am just very grateful that you've had the time in your busy schedule to talk and some really thoughtful conversation today. If dance studios are wanting maybe some more confidence? Or do you do mentorship or anything? Maybe they can just read your book. What do you offer?
Yeah, the books are a great starting point.
Yeah.
And also joining my email list from the
Yeah.
chastahamilton.com site.
Yeah.
I'm going to have some more resources coming soon that I think are going to be very helpful. The books are a great benchmark to get that thought flowing. But obviously,
Yeah.
even since 2020, the times have changed. So I have some stuff in the pipeline that's going to help people think about how they differentiate, how they can tell their story. And
Yeah.
I really just love connecting with people. So just as you reached out, Kate, which I'm so glad you did, I encourage anyone to send a message or send a DM. And I love learning and hearing what's going on.
Oh, well, I've been really excited to have these conversations with you, and I appreciate it. And I hope that Australian and German, I have some German listeners, if they want to follow you on Instagram and find your website, we'll put a link in here and they can sign up to your newsletter. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thanks so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much.
This has been great.